managing the media pool, right? The media pool itself will consist of a set of tapes, right? And it's being logically grouped, right? And used exclusively, right, for a particular recurring backup or job. So within Axon Backup, each media pool is automatically divided into the scratch set and a save set. Right, so save sets are media that cannot be overwritten, right? It's your backup data that you actually keep, that you actually back up. Whereas for scratch set will consist of the media that can be reused for backup. Also, when a backup job uses the media pool, right, the media will be moved from the save set after writing to the media. Right, so when the media in the save set is used by the backup job, you will only move back to the script set once the specified criteria has. Right, so the criteria to move the media from save set to scratch set depends on the retention time and the minimum number of saved media. Right, so these are the two criteria. So when we talk about minimum number of saved media, right, you can actually define the minimum number of saved media to be retained in the media pool. Basically, this is the number of media that need to be retained in the save set before the older media are recycled to the save set. So basically, this is to safeguard for preventing any data loss in case the backup are not done for extended period of time. Right, whereas for the retention time, right, so this is in number of days. Right, so this is the number of days that the media has not been used before it is being moved into the script set. For example, if you specify a retention time of 14 days, the media will remain in the save set as long as it has been used within that specified time. Right? If the media has not been used for 14 days, it will be moved to the scratch set. Right? So that is the retention time. Now let's take a look a little bit more on the save set. When the backup job starts, you pick up the available tape media, right? After formatting the media, right, you move the tape to save set and the backup job starts writing to the tape. Right, so this is how the process actually is being done by Axon Backup. The scratch set, right, can be an individual scratch set for each media pool, or it can be a global scratch set. Right, you can have multiple individual scratch set for your daily, weekly, and monthly job. Or you can use a global scratch set for all the jobs itself. Right, so you have two options in terms of configuring the scratch sets. So using the global scratch set, right, this is option is actually enabled by default, right? The global scratch set will treat all the scratch tape in the media pool as belonging to one big scratch set. This ensures that when your backup job, your backup job will never fail because the scratch tape is not available in its own media pool. Right? So as long as there's a scratch tape existing in the scratch set, global scratch set, any backup job can move tapes from any media pool in the scratch set before starting its backup. Right? So this is actually the easiest in terms of managing instead of using the individual scratch set. Right, a tape will move from save set to scratch sets when two conditions are met, right? The minimum, when it has reaches the retention time, right, you will move on, right, onto the media pool, right? The media pool should have media greater than the value set for the minimum number of media in the safe set itself, right? It's important to run the database pruning job on a daily basis for consistency of media pool, right? You can actually enable the media pool maintenance option, right? The prune job will actually run by default 12 p.m., right? So by default, there will be a database pruning job, right? So all the jobs that need to be moved from the safe set to the scratch set, right, for rotation job will be moved automatically when the database prune job is run, right? Admin, as administrator itself, right, you can actually go to the quick start administration menu, right, to configure this. Okay. Right, if you need to modify the media pool, you can go to the manager console, right, under administrator, media pool. Right, so for the media pool manager, you can select the media pool for which you want to change the retention time. Right, if you look at the bottom right screenshot there, you can see that you can actually set the value for retention time, right? And by using the properties, right? Selecting properties from the list, right? And after backup will detect and assign the media serial number when the media is formatted and placed in a specified media pool itself. Right, you can enter a name for the media pool, right? As well as the rest of the field, right? Such as the minimum number of media in the media set, retention time, the prune retention time, etc. Right, so all these you can actually define. Right, looking at the media information, right? So it's a long list, right? It includes the ID of the media, right? A serial number, a sequence number, time of the very first small formatting of the tape, time of last format, last write, last read, etc., as well as the expiry date, which is by default 3 years. You can change it, right? If you need longer than 3 years, depending on how you intend to use the tape in your environment, right? The backup method as well, the set status, media status, location, etc. And so all these can be defined are the information within the media, right? The expiration date actually tracks how long the media should be used, right? As I mentioned, default is 3 years. You can actually change it, right? Now let's take a look at how AXA backup schedule and media pool management in details, right? When you schedule a backup job, right, there are a few options that you can actually define in terms of the job schedule, right? You can either use a custom schedule or you can use a rotation schedule or scheme using GFS or a rotation scheme without GFS, right? So this gives you the flexibility to cater for your backup environment. Okay, there is a repeat method, right? This actually defines how the schedule jobs using the schedule options, right? So you can actually define that. And there's also a 10 days option. right? So the append this option lets you append backups to the tape for the number of days that you actually specify. So this option for append actually helps you to maximize the amount of data stored on the tape and minimize the number of tapes that you need to store data for the backup job. Right, so as a best practice, you should use this option when you perform a relatively small volume of data backup daily. However, you can also apply these options to all custom backup schedule, right? Except for the ones backup job and grandfather, father, son, GFS method. Right, so the other one, the rotation scheme basics with GFS, right? This is the grandfather, father, son rotation strategy method of maintaining backup on a daily, weekly, and monthly basis. Right, so GFS scheme basically allows you to define how many daily, weekly, as well as monthly backups to keep. So the purpose is to maintain a minimum standard, right, and consistent interval at which you want to rotate the entire media, right? So you always use the oldest media first, right? So as a guideline, right, you should always do a full backup at least once a week, right? So on other days, you can do a daily incremental, right, partial backup, right? So the advantage of using a GFS rotation scheme is, right, once it is configured, you only need to make sure that the right media in the drive for each day of the week, right? And there is also another rotation schedule that is without GFS. Now let's take a look at the custom schedule. Right, so when configuring the custom schedule, right, you can specify the media pool to use, whether to use an existing media pool or a new media pool, right? And there's also a backup media option for you to configure for the first backup media and additional backup media, right? So what is the first backup media? Right, so the first backup media is the media that you will use when the backup jobs begins or starts. Right, so this option for the first media determine the override rules for the very first media that is being used for the backup job. Whereas the additional backup media applies to job that requires more than one media to determine the override rules for the additional media that you requires. Right, so you need to specify which media AXA backup can use when the media job spans across medias. Let's take a look at the custom schedule. Right, so for the custom schedule itself, you can see from the media pool manager, you can edit the media pool configuration as I mentioned, right? The retention time that you want to keep for the number of days, right? And there will be also a serial number range, right? That you can configure under custom schedule, right? A typical use case, I'm going to use this for custom schedule, right? So this is the use case one. Basically, for this custom schedule itself, right, the backup job will run on every Friday, right? So it actually runs on every Friday. This is what we have been configured, right, in this screenshot, right? And every week, it will start with a new media, right? That means override same media, right? Start with a new media and overrides the old Friday media, right? So this is the configuration, right? And we also define that this is the media pool name. This is optional, right? You can use a naming convention that you adopt in the organization, or you can use the default, which is basically the date and time format, right? And you can also provide a media pool name. In this case, it's called weekly pool, right? So the changer will pick up the media available from slot 1 to slot 8, right? In this particular setup. Right, so the weekly retention is to keep for 3 weeks, right? So that is being configured over here, right? So we'll keep for 3 weeks. Okay. Right, let's take a look at the custom schedule simulation for use case number 1. Right. So on week 1 Friday, right, the backup will actually run, and you'll pick up a tape media, right? So notice that the tape media will have an ID, right, and the serial number. Right? So the ID will actually identify the tape, right? So it's unique to the particular tape itself, right? And there's also the time you can see of the first format, time of last format, right? So it could be you format the tape again after that, right? So there'll be multiple time where you actually format the tape, right? Time of last write, time of last read. So all these are the properties of this particular tape itself, right? And it also tells you that the backup method being used is custom, right? And because you're using this tape for the backup, you'll be moved to the safe set, right? Media status is normal. That means it's working, right? It's a good tape. And so once you done the backup itself, right? So you have a copy of your backup for the first week. Okay. On the second week, Friday, right, you will pick up another tape media, right? So the ID is different, right? Notice that the ID is 9240, right? And the previous week, the ID is 57E6, right? And you will start the backup, right, for week number 2. When it comes to week number 3, right, you'll start the backup again using a new tape, right? So the ID is CBB5. Right, remember we configure to keep for 3 weeks, right? So on the 4th week, the oldest media, right, will be reused, right, and it'll be reformatted, given a new ID. Okay. So you notice that there is a time of first format, which is on 7th of the month, and now it's reformatted again on the 28th of June. Okay, so this is how the custom schedule, based on the configuration that we set, right, to override the tape, right, to keep for 3 copies of your release backup. Okay. So what about if you don't want to override the tape, but rather you want to use a custom schedule instead? Right, so if you want to use a pen, right, you can do that. Right, so you can actually under schedule, right, you take the pen and set the options, right, number of days, in this case we set to 5 days, right, as well as define the first backup media, so override the same media name or blank media. Okay, so this is for the append custom schedule, right? So how does the simulation looks like compared to the override custom media, right? So let's take a look at the simulation here. So right, so we start the backup on, say, Wednesday. So as usual, right, you have a new tape, right? And this will be the details in terms of the when it was being formatted, when was the read and write being done, right? So we have done the first backup on Wednesday. When it comes to Thursday, right? Hang on. Right, so when it comes to Thursday, right, because we are using the append, right, custom schedule, right, so you reuse back the same tape media, right? So the ID is the same, E95A, right? And you will start to perform the backup for Thursday, right? On Friday, you do the same thing, right? And on the next week, Monday, right, we'll continue with the backup. And remember, we keep for how many days? We keep for 5 days, right? We configure 5 days for 10, right? So on the next week, the 6th copy of the 6th backup, right? On the day 6 will be picking up a new tape instead, right? So you will not be using back the same tape media, right? So this is how the pen works, right? Okay, having covered the custom job schedule, next I will want to cover the rotation job schedule itself. Right, so when it comes to rotation job, right, you can actually define a couple of things here, right? So in this screenshot, the schedule will actually start on this particular date, right? At this time of 9 p.m. on that date itself, right? And it was being set to override in terms of the rotation rules, right? And backup is incremental from Monday to Thursday, and there's a full backup on the Friday, right? So this is the example in this screenshot for rotation, right? You can also do a append, right? Instead, if you want to do a append, right, you'll notice that when you do append, right, the media name, right, because the you'll be using back the same media. So the media name you notice here is the Monday media name, right? It's just for example, it was being called Monday, right? So the same media will be used for Monday to Thursday for the incremental backup. Okay. Right, except for the very first day, right? Because you'll be using the override rules, right? Right, so for the rotation job, right? Similarly, you can also define the media pool configuration, right? To use override, right? right? Rotation GFS, right? I believe some of you will be quite familiar in terms of GFS, right? It's not something new, but it's actually tape has been around for many years, right? So for those who have been managing tape or selling tape medias or tape libraries or tape backup solution, right? So GFS basically stands for the grandfather, father, son, right? So it's actually a rotation strategy to maintain your backup on the daily, weekly, and monthly basis, right? So we call the daily backup son media, right? And a full backup typically will be performed once a week, right? So the last full backup of the week is the father media, right? The last full backup of the month is the grandfather media. Okay, so that is the grandfather, father, son rotation, right? For monthly, weekly, and daily backup. Right, so the first rotation cycle, right? The media itself, right, can be a blank tape, it can be a media in the scratch set, right? Right, take a look at this example given here, right? So this is a rotation, grandfather, father, son, right? Configuration. For the daily, it was configured to retain for 4 days. For weekly, to retain for 5 weeks before you recycle. For monthly, to retain 12 months. Right, so how many tapes do you need in this example here? Right, I think let's take a look at the daily first. Right, so daily again is quite straightforward. Right, you have 4 copies of your daily backup before you recycle. Right, recycle. Right, so you always have 4 tapes. Right, for the weekly, right, you want to keep for 5 weeks. Right, so week 1, week 2, week 3 is your weekly. Week 4, this is the last full backup of the month. So it will be a full backup. It's a monthly backup, right? It's a monthly backup. Right. After that, it will be the 4th weekly, 5th weekly. Right. So this is how it looks like. Right. Before you reuse the tape, right? Notice that you reuse the tape for the next weekly backup. Right. So the number of monthly backup, in this case, we have to keep for 12 months. Right. So 12 copies of tape. Right. You need 12 tapes. So 12 plus 5 plus 4, total you need 21 tapes for this particular GFS rotation scheme. Right, so this is a good example to illustrate how many tapes you will need, right, for such a GFS rotation. Right, let's take a look at a simulation here. Right, so we start the first backup job on Monday, right, to Thursday. Right, so we are actually using a new tape media. Right, so notice that we have different tape ID, right, for Monday to Thursday. So this is our daily backup. Right, on Friday we perform a weekly full backup, right, using a different tape media. And on the next week, right, you will reuse the oldest tape as the media that you need to use for the Monday backup. Right, so the previous Monday is the oldest tape, so you'll be reviewing it, right? Reformat as well as assign a new ID to continue with the backup itself. Right, so this is the GFS rotation. Okay, you continue doing that. And oh, sorry, let me rewind. On the 26th, this is actually the full backup is actually the monthly backup, right? Because this is the last full backup of the month, right? So this is the standard that most backup software will actually adopt, right? The very last full backup of the month will be the monthly backup, right? And notice that on the 3rd of the following month, right, is a weekly backup. Okay. Right, when you come to a GFS rotation job, right, you may want to maximize the media that you use, right? As you can see in the previous illustration, right, you will need 21 tapes, right, for the 4 weekly, so 4 daily, 5 weekly, and 12 monthly GFS schedule itself, right? Right, so let's take a look at this example here. If you are using GFS override method, right, and you have 3 GFS backup jobs, you have 5 daily incremental full backup on the Friday. Right, so how many tapes do you need? Right, you can look at Monday to Friday, right? So Monday you have 3 full backup, right? So you need 1 tape for job 1, 1 tape for job 2, and 1 for job 3, right? On Tuesday, right, you do 3 incremental jobs, right? So you need 3 tapes, right? Wednesday, similarly, you're doing incremental, right? And you also require 3 tapes. On Thursday is also incremental. So total 1, 2, and 3 tapes. Right, and on Friday it should be a full backup, right? So Friday you have 3 weekly backup jobs that need 3 tapes as well, right? 1, 2, and 3. So total 5 times 3, you need 50 tapes in a week, right? So this is how you compute the number of tapes you need, right, for 3 GFS backup jobs that you keep for 5 days incremental with a full backup on Friday. Right, so if you look at it from a table format, right, this is the same example in the previous slides, right? So this is for Monday, right? You have 3 backup jobs. Tuesday, 3 backup jobs also, right? Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, right? So Friday is your weekly full backup, right? And you continue the same thing, right, for the next following week, but you reuse the media, right? Notice that you actually reuse the media here, right? For the weekly, reuse. Weekly, you will reuse, right? And the last full backup of the month, right? This is your monthly backup, right? As I always mention, right? Actually, this was inherited from the mainframe time, right? The last full backup of the month for the tape media itself, this will be your monthly backup. Okay. Right, so maximizing media in GFS rotation job, right? So when you submit multiple GFS job, you can use the same media pool, right? You can also append media jobs to the same tape set, right? Rather than creating new tape set for each job, right? Which will actually consume more tape, right? And that will help to drastically reduce the amount of media that you use when you submit the JFS rotation job. Okay. Right. So some rules for media maximization. You use the same rotation scheme. You start your JFS jobs on the same day. Right. And thirdly, you modify your multiple JFS jobs to use a new media pool. You make the modification on the same day. Otherwise, the media sharing will only begin after the weekend if you don't modify them on the same day. Right? And you modify existing GFS jobs to use the same media pool as other GFS jobs. Right? When you do the modification, if the existing GFS job they modify, use the same rotation scheme, right? The media sharing should begin right away. However, if any of the jobs has been running for less than 1 week, the media sharing will only begin after the weekend. So this is some rules that you need to observe when you want to configure for the media maximization for your tape. Right, so you submit the JFS rotation job, right, without the append media, or you can also submit your JFS rotation job with append media enabled. Right, so with append media enabled, that could help you to save in terms of the media used for the backup itself. Right, override methods for JFS. Right, so in this case, right, we use 5 tapes. I noticed that yeah, you're doing a 5 days backup schedule with a full backup on Friday. Right, because you're using override method. Right, so when override, you will helps to reuse back the tape, right, from job 1. Okay. So in total, you only need 5 tapes in this case. Okay. Right, so this is how you look at it from a table format or calendar format. Right. So day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, right, and the weekly, right? So you can see that you actually reuse the media. Right. So all the jobs will actually share the same media, right? For both job 1, job 2, and job 3. Right, instead of having a separate media for each job. Right, so in this case, you're sharing the same media. Okay. Right, you can also use JFS append method. Right, so the same 5 days incremental full backup on Friday. Right, if you look at the number of tape used, if you use the append method, right, from Monday to Thursday, right, you only use 1 tape that includes the full backup from Monday, which is right, and all the incremental jobs on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday will append to the same tape, and you have 1 tape for your weekly backup. Right, so you only need 2 tapes in this case, right, if you use append method. Right, so this is how it looks like from the calendar view, right? So when you start on week number 1, right, so you have 1 tape used by all the backup jobs, and you append to the same tape media. Right, on the next week you will reuse it for your daily backup, right? And you reuse the same tape similarly, right? You always append within the same week. You only overwrite, right, when you comes to the next following week, Monday. Okay, so total only 2 tapes in the middle. Right, so there are also some rules for overlapping media in case the media is busy, right? So there are some settings, right? Override method, the wait time is 10 minutes by default, right? So basically, it's, you will get a media using the media rules, right? That is the timeout settings. For the append media, 10 minutes timeout. So basically, the timeout will be using the current date to generate another media, attempt to use it, right? And you wait, if it's busy, right, you wait for 10 minutes and timeout, you format another media with a new name, right? So that's the behavior of the timeout settings. Right, so where do you configure the timeout settings? Right, you can go to the registry key to modify it, right? The GFS wait time, right? So default is 10 minutes. If you want to increase to a higher value, right, you can actually change it, right, by going to this register key settings here, right? So that actually helps you to customize, right, in terms of the timeout. Okay, so so that is what we have prepared for today for the set and scratch tape management within Axel Backup. Right, so hopefully this actually helps to give you a good idea in terms of the how you actually manage the tape media within Axel Backup, right? There's a media pool, right? You can have individual or you can have a global, right? Scratch media, right? You can also configure whether you want to use the tape as override or append, right? You have custom schedule, you have append, GFS, rotation scheme with GFS or rotation scheme without GFS that you can actually use, right? When you configure the backup schedule. Okay, so with that, I've come to the end of the session. Right, so at the end of the webinar itself, right, there will be a survey form that actually pops up. So if you need the local sales team to contact you, please indicate yes and provide some information, right? So that the local sales team within your country can follow up with you. Okay, so thank you everyone for attending, right? So in some of the countries, I believe it's lunchtime. So have a good lunch and have a good day. Bye-bye.